2 days ago, I was sitting over there across from the guest library shelves, and this book jumped off the shelf at me. It's called A Fearless Heart, How the Courage to be Compassionate Can Transform Our Lives. And the word fearless is something that has a lot of meaning for me. When I found out Buddhas were fearless, I decided I wanted to be one. But inside the jacket it says that typically people are afraid of compassion. We're afraid of being too compassionate with others because we're afraid that people will take advantage of us. Is that true? And we're afraid of being too compassionate with ourselves because we're afraid we'll turn into a slacker. Self-centered, self-indulgent. Okay. Well, obviously this book is about developing compassion, and he makes the case that compassion is fundamental to our basic nature as human beings. And I need to hear that again and again. He says, by connecting with our compassionate nature, nurturing it, relating to ourselves, others, and the world around us from this place, this is the key to our happiness. So, compassion, broadly defined, is a sense of concern that arises when we encounter the suffering in others, and also feel motivated to see that suffering ended. That's a broad definition, or from a Buddhist point of view, it's the wish for ourselves and others to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. So undoubtedly, I think most of us would agree that compassion is already important in our lives, and society more generally. It's integral to every part of our life as a human being. When we're confronted with suffering, we feel, instinctively, we feel a wish to relieve that suffering. And also when we suffer ourselves, then we're touched when others take the time to help us with our problems. And also, thanks to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, research on positive states of mind like compassion is now very mainstream in many universities and widely accepted. Probably there are articles in Reader's Digest about compassion. The interesting thing to note, though, is that despite our understanding about the relevance of compassion, that it's difficult to make it give it a central role in our lives. And of course, from a Buddhist point of view, that's all the more important because compassion is really what Buddhism is about. I wonder if this is, to a large degree, why Bernie Sanders is so popular, is that he's bringing a compassionate approach to a lot of our moral and ethical dilemmas as a society. So the interesting thing to keep in mind is that we all have seeds of compassion in our mind, and if we nurture them and pay attention to them and develop them, then our inclination to act beneficially towards others and also to limit or reduce the harmful ways that we respond to others will grow day by day. But I find for myself, I need ongoing encouragement to keep this forefront in my mind, to make compassion the central reality of my life. And so books like this, A Fearless Heart, or Venerable Chodon's book, An Open-Hearted Life, can give us that daily inspiration that we need. One of the ways that we can make compassion more central to our lives is by understanding the benefits. And we see this a lot in the Lam Rim. First, the benefits are identified of a topic, the disadvantages are identified, and that gets our interest, it piques our interest. So actually the list is growing day by day with all this research that's happening, specifically on compassion. But the interesting paradox about compassion is that we ourselves are probably the greatest beneficiary when we are involved in practicing it. So compassion makes us happier. Is that your experience? It gets us out of our usual head full of anxieties and worries and disappointments and feelings of guilt, feelings of low self-esteem. It's a great antidote to self-criticism and feelings of shame, which I think plague a lot of people these days. It may seem counterintuitive, but compassion makes us more optimistic. Isn't that interesting? Even though we're focusing on suffering, it's involved with this positive wish for ourselves or the other person to be free of that suffering, and it also gives us the possibility to actually take steps to be free of that suffering. Compassion also gives us a sense of purpose beyond our habitual petty obsessions about I, me, and mine. It can lighten our hearts and lifts our stress, gives us a sense of ease and comfort in our body and mind. It gives us, with compassion, we become more understanding and patient with ourselves and others, and we have an alternative to anger and self-hate and reactive states of mind. Compassion makes us feel less lonely, less afraid. It actually makes us more resilient to life's ups and downs. There's a lot of research coming out about that. And as I mentioned, it can provide a moral compass to our lives, which I think is really important in this day and age when there isn't much of that in the media and society at large. Physiologically, there are many benefits to practicing compassion. I remember seeing some research by Dr. David Richardson. This was like 10 years ago, but some of the initial research that he did was about how compassion increases our immune system and speeds up the healing process. It has a strong connection with the vagal nerve in the body as well. It releases oxytocin, which is the hormone of love, so it gives us that little bit of a buzz. And compassion has been shown to be particularly helpful for people with post-traumatic stress disorder, which I think might include more people than we realize, people who've had traumatic experiences in their past, emotional abuse, physical abuse, those sorts of things. So by hearing that, do you want to do some more meditating on compassion? The surge of scientific research on compassion in the last 10 years is helping to undermine what before was a dominant view that portrays us as a society as selfish and intrinsically competitive or instinctively competitive. In fact, that term, survival of the fittest, that's often attributed to Charles Darwin, that term was actually coined by social Darwinists who wanted to justify class and race superiority. It wasn't something that Darwin said. Actually, in one of his books called Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex, Darwin makes a strong case that communities which include the greatest number of the most sympathetic members would flourish best and rear the greatest number of offspring. That's very different than survival of the fittest. So compassion may indeed be a natural, adaptive, evolved trait. There's a growing body of evidence suggests that at our core, both animals and humans actually have a compassionate instinct instead. And in other words, compassion is a natural and automatic response that ensures our survival. So we need it not only personally, but as a society. We need a cultural revolution in compassion, a compassionate revolution. There we go. So I thought to end by mentioning another book that people might be interested in, it's called Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff. And she has a very simple formula in there that I've personally found helpful. So I'd like to leave you with this suggestion for developing greater self-compassion, because as we know, if we don't have genuine compassion for ourselves, how can we extend it to others? So when you notice that you're suffering, give this a try today or tomorrow. When you notice that you're suffering physically, mentally, emotionally, there's a very simple 4-step mantra, really, that we can call to mind. So the first step is to acknowledge, this is a moment of suffering. So in that way, we're bringing a mindful awareness to what's happening, acknowledging reality. This is a moment of suffering. The second step is suffering is part of life. It's a shared experience, right? It keeps us from feeling alone. And also, as we know, it's a shared experience of samsara. Let's see, do I still have seeds of affliction in my mind? Yep, okay, I'm going to suffer today. It's probably a guarantee. So suffering is part of life. The third step is, may I be kind to myself in this moment. So bringing caring concern to ourselves. May I be kind to myself in this moment. And then the last one is, may I give myself the compassion that I need. So there we're setting the intention to respond to the situation, not through self-criticism or feeling like we're a failure, we have no self-worth, whatever the case may be, whatever the repetitive tape is in the mind, but bringing genuine self-concern. So I hope that's helpful.